welcome to Rethinking Economics. I'm Ravi Navaratnam, the Executive Director of Sage 3. You know, Ravi, one of the things in your report, Rethinking Economics, is this whole concept of government debt. It's misunderstood. People have this perception that government debt is bad. Yeah. Talk us through it. I mean,
okay. Couple of things that comes out in government debt, right? Government debt in itself is never bad if it's used for mission critical things, right? That's the first thing, right? What becomes a problem when it's used for, it ends up in the, the money is then used and ends up in the hands of the people in power or the corrupt,
right.
Yeah, and it gets to like luxury items.
Birkin bags.
I'm not going to say any particular bags, but luxury items, private bank accounts, property, etc. Then it becomes an issue, right? So government debt, if it's used for mission critical things, is never a bad thing because it actually...
Even if government debt is at extreme levels.
Okay, now there are, what those levels are, we can talk a little bit more about it, but the other main concept which people need to really understand is the government's debt is actually the private sector's savings. Now that's one which I actually illustrate by actually showing you a little bit of a demonstration. Because they are actually mirror images, and I'll explain that.
So that's why we're here. That's why we're sitting on this table. All
yeah.
Right.
Okay. That's why we're here.
Okay.
Now, if I'm the government and I want to do something, I want to get around and do things in the economy, I need to raise money, right? So I will issue debt, and here I got a long-term money of 120 on a Sagery bill and another $80 in a short-term bill, right? And I'll go to my central bank, which is you, and say, right. Here's these bills, and give me that $200 million.
Okay, which is
which is here.
Okay.
And I'm going to start spending it in the economy and on the population, right? So I'm going to spend 100 million to you, yeah, and I'm going to spend 100 million to you. Now, I'm going to then say, okay, the economy is now grown by 200 million. We're spending money in that economy. And I'm going to say, okay, guys, you may earn 100 million or $100. Can I now have 40% in tax? So pay me $40 in tax.
Well, it's a high tax rate.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, we're not indicating that. Yeah, okay, but it's $40 in tax.
That's the Sage 3 tax rate.
Okay, okay. And I will then redeem the short-term loan. I'm going to pay you $80, and we're going to extinguish this debt.
Okay.
Yeah, it's extinguished.
Okay.
All right,
you still owe me $120.
Yeah, I owe you $120. How much money have you got?
60.
And how much money have you got?
60.
Okay, 60 is your money, plus her 60 is 120. That's your savings. And what's the government's debt?
120.
The private sector's savings is the government's debt. And that's a very important concept. The reason is, who is better at handling debt? The private sector, the government. The private sector can only borrow to a point, and that's what happened in the global financial crisis. You can only borrow to a point, same with the Asian financial crisis. So it's no point running government surpluses, for sure.
It would have been the other way around. Right? Because you guys would have had the debt, and I would be...
Guess what? The only time we ran a government surplus was just before the Asian financial crisis. Is that surprising? Not really, isn't it? Because the private sector cannot take on debt indefinitely, whereas the government with fiat money, there's nothing stopping this government in ringgit terms spending, really. There's nothing. We can print that money, right? And there's really nothing as long as the economy can produce products and services with the expansion of demand. That's all there is to it. You don't need to think. And this problem about government debt, and this one, actually, we go back and look at the history of the United States. They've been talking about this in the 1920s, 90s. It's all going to crash. It's all going to fall down. If I asked you what's China's debt to GDP, Japan's, it's into the hundreds. There's never been a problem. And in fact, a lot of the studies which were done, it comes to two gentlemen called Reinhardt and Ragov, who then said, one man and a lady, sorry, and they actually said if the government gets to 90% of debt to GDP, it's going to be a problem. But well, guess what? They've actually found flaws in their study. We've seen this in many countries. It's not been correct. The other thing is they also said private sector debt shouldn't grow too fast. That means 10% or 150% of debt to GDP. Yeah, because we look back at the data, what they call the crisis countries, and I'll show you this in this graph, what they looked at the crisis countries, it doesn't mean if you are in the crisis, you are going to enter into a crisis, or the danger zone, you are going to enter a crisis. And it doesn't mean if you're outside the danger zone, you don't go into a crisis. So we looked at the data.
If you have that surplus, there's no validity. Okay,
there's really these issues on these ratios.
So then look at Malaysia today, right? We have this crazy debt at this point in time. What should the government be doing? Should we be spending more?
What I'm saying is, if we have things which are mission critical,
Right.
we shouldn't stop.
Which is to develop the economy. Which
Yeah,
is to
we
grow.
can't cut the development
Like-
expenditure. We need to expand. And there's no real need to be fixated, yeah, about, reducing the debt to GDP ratios or deficits, spending, if it's going to help the economy. I'm sure, of course, the government has to balance. We understand the balance have to balance the requirements of rating agencies and so forth. But at times, you've got to then take some decisions, bold if necessary, sit back and say, what do we need to do to actually grow the economy? Well, there's also other possibilities if there are equity-type instruments the government can issue, which are not considered debt. Again, that's one possibility. But I'm just saying, the first thing is, this whole idea of
because
rethinking
there's a
economics.
belief that
It's about discussing the issues. The whole idea is about, okay, now we understand this, what do we want to do? It's not about, let's be fixated because somebody said it and it's not necessarily right, that we are fixated with an idea that we must reduce the debt or deficit ratio. What is it that we can do? Yeah, no one's advocating, ridiculous debt and stupid spending. Who's advocating that?
And spending for wrong reasons.
Wrong
like you said,
reasons, yeah. But if it's stuff that's needed, which can grow the economy, then why are we holding back? And as long as we can control inflation, why not? Yeah, and it's not something which is in foreign currency. Again, why not?
But this is really a big,
Actually,
game-changing idea because all of us have always thought, at least I have, that debt is bad, right?
Well, I think,
and you've just shown us that maybe.
Okay, it's not. I wouldn't say it's original thinking.
Yeah.
There's a lady called Stephanie Carlton, which has been at the hot on this,
Yeah.
and she's talked about it for a long, long time. And all we're saying is, guys, sit back, think, act, not just be fixated because rating agency tells us that this is the way we must run our country. We certainly didn't do that in 1998.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ravi. Appreciate your time. This has been a very insightful. I get to keep the money, right?
You mean you get to owe me $120? Sure, keep the debt. Pay me later.